Guys, what's going on? This is your first Grandmaster build for the upcoming GMs next week, and there's quite a few builds for each class, but in this one we're aiming to be a Titan support build in those Grandmaster Nightfalls. So your team will gain mostly all the benefits, but at the same time you'll still be able to maintain good DPS. But this build will allow you to pretty much spawn infinite special and heavy ammo for your team when you finish certain adds, as well as giving them elemental wells, orbs, always giving them charge light, whilst also giving yourself extra protection too. But we'll dive into that shortly after today's sponsor, which is Aeon. So if you're looking to get your hands on some cheap silver, then be sure to check out their website linked below and use my code DIVIDE for a discount when checking out. And now guys, get ready for a quick GM build, timestamps below. Be sure to leave a thumbs up or down, drop a comment and subscribe as it really helps me out. But now let's get into it. Now this build is going to be or should be a fairly quicker one than usual, and if you guys need any additional support at all, then don't be afraid to ask those questions below. I'm happy to help every single one of you. But now as always, before we properly start, the full playlist to these build videos is below if you're interested in viewing any other top and fun builds in Destiny 2. Also, there is an alternative build that you can use in GMs, which is the Middle Tree Ursa build. So if you want to run a GM with that build instead, it's in the playlist from a few builds back. But today's build here will be shown in a Master Nightfall whilst underpowered, as GMs are currently not out yet, and I did have a mic-less team as well, so that's another downside. As with this build, you really want to be coordinated well, so you can tell your team that you're finishing a champion, and not have them completely melt them. That did kind of happen a lot in this Nightfall. So with this one, you're going to be supporting your allies with the Aeon Exotic, and this thing is so underrated because this allows you to spawn heavy ammo when you finish a champion, and special ammo when you finish small yellow bars. Of course, the downside is that you don't get the ammo, only your team does, but giving your team that ammo on every champion kill means they should never really run out, and therefore make GMs so much easier, especially when you take into consideration how many champions actually exist in a GM. So essentially, giving you this example in my usual Tessenos sector, this is how you would actually use the build in a GM. Firstly, you'll run into your yellow bar add or champion when they are low, and finish off the kill using a finisher. This will spawn special or heavy ammo for your team for whichever the kill was for, as well as 2 arc elemental wells. When you pick up those 2 arc elemental wells, you'll gain 2 stacks of charger light, and your entire team will also gain the 2 stacks of charger light, while also giving them the wells to pick up for themselves on top. And those charge light stacks will mostly save you in situations where you really should be dead, but when you're ready for some serious damage, drop a bubble down and be on your way. Now there are a ton of different ways and mods that you can use with this build, so if you don't like my setup and feel you have a better one, then be sure to share and discuss it below, as I'd love to hear all of them. But this build is for anyone that does want to make use of the Aeon Exotic on a Titan for endgame content. But now let's take a look at that setup and how we can achieve this build. Of course, starting with the loadout, you have a ton to choose from, but basing this on a GM or Master Nightfall, you want to go with the current seasonal meta, which are fusion rifles. But you have to take into consideration that you may need to also deal with specific champions and match game shields, but you do also have a team to bring more flexibility when it comes to loadout choice. My recommendations on a Master or Grandmaster Nightfall, for example, would be a kinetic bow to stun overload champions, but other choices are any bows for overloads, pulse rifles for unstoppables, or auto rifles for anti-barriers this season. For your energy, I'd go with fusion rifles that match the majority of enemy shields, so whether that's a null composure for void or a plug one for arc, but then a 1000 voices is perfect for DPS for your heavy, which you can get from the Last Wish raid. Now your alternative exotic weapons are Vex Mythoclast, Lorentz Driver, Tiku's Divination, a Divinity, great for extra DPS and stunning overloads, Ariana's Vow, although it may seem a little weak in a GM, but it will cover your barriers, and of course a 1000 voices. But you could even use the Lament, although I wouldn't recommend it unless using a passive guard artifact mod. Now the exotic armor is going to be the Aeon Safe, so underrated, but we'll get to this shortly. And now as I mentioned, you can also use Ursa, but I've made a build using this already, so if you want to see that, it's in the playlist. So today's is going to be focused around the Aeon Safe. But moving into the subclass, we are a top tree Void that comes with a Weapons of Light bubble for an additional 35% damage for our team. And now you can use Banner Shield if you want without the Ursas and instead use Energy Converter, but then you may as well just use the Ursa build. So we'll be going with the Titan bubble for this one specifically. Moving on to the armor mods, Your main charge light and elemental well mods you'll want are Overcharge Wellmaker. This will spawn 2 arc elemental wells when you use your finisher. And then the next mod is Elemental Charge, where we become Charge Light when picking up those elemental wells. Alongside this, we have Taken Charge, where picking up Orbs of Power also allows us to become Charge Light, as you want to become Charge Light as much as possible, because you're really going to need it, as our next mod is Protective Light, where we'll consume all those stacks of Charge Light to gain significant damage resistance against enemies when our shields are destroyed. With 2 stacks, the duration is 9 seconds, and with 4 stacks, if you instead decide to use Supercharge, it's 15 seconds, for how long that buff actually lasts. Moving on though, the very last mod is Powerful Friends, where your allies will become Charge Light every time we do. Perfect if they are using some similar builds that have Protective Light or other Charge Light mods, so finishing that champion is going to give them so many benefits. But moving on to our normal mods for the helmet, we have our Ammo Finder mod for a heavy weapon. For the gauntlets we have Aeon Safe with the Sect of Insight Aeon Cult mod. This gives you a chance to spawn Orbs of Power and precision takedowns, but more importantly, when you use your finisher on an elite, which is a yellow bar, you'll spawn special ammo for your team. When you use your finisher on a boss or mini boss, which can be a champion, you'll spawn heavy ammo for your team. And if they're also using the Aeon Exotic, they'll gain bonus weapon damage on top. An amazing exotic and so underrated, but the mods we have with this are your champion mods that you may need, and you should have enough to use any mod that you do need. But for the chest we have Concussive Dampener for reduced area of effect damage, as well as our Ammo Reserve mod for a heavy weapon. Moving on to the legs, we have our Scavenger mod for a heavy weapon, as well as our Arc mod to activate the secondary perk from Powerful Friends. And lastly though, for the class, we are using Particle Deconstruction to weaken enemies with fusion rifles, the current meta mod this season from the artifact. But of course, if you're not using fusions, then you wouldn't use this, and instead you can use anything of your choice. Another option is Special Finisher, although just be aware that if you don't have enough super energy to do a finisher, then you won't be able to finish every champion for your Aeon Exotic to drop ammo for your team. But for a GM Nightfall, the stat you would want to max out is Recovery and Resilience in my opinion, and this here guys is the artifact setup for this build. Now overall I do like this build, but I'm generally not a support person, so it's not something I'd use, and you should really have a hunter run the Aeon Exotic instead, but this is a build option for those who have the exotic and want to use this in a GM. You will need to have some communication with your team so you can tell them that you're going to be doing a finisher, otherwise you might just screw yourself over. One last thing as well, when you use this build, don't try and act like you're an unstoppable god, because you will just end up getting yourself killed if you do run in on a champion when there's ads still about everywhere. It happens, I've done it so many times, so a bit of advice here, kill all the ads in the room first, and then go for the champions. Unless of course you have an unstoppable chasing you around the map, then sure, kill it. But this is a build definitely worth using this season. But guys, that is all for this quick GM build for the Titan. Next you should go check out the full playlist below for more and drop a comment of what you think of this one. And for now as always, give this one a try, leave a rating and subscribe for more like this, and I'll catch you all very soon for the next one.